Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Financing Committee meeting to order. I'd like to recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Stamwick First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. Question period sign-up sheet is by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the audience has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item number on the sheet. Members have been granted authority to join us electronically this morning, and I want to welcome Councillors Armstrong and Emmons to the meeting. The first item on the agenda, the introduction of late items. We don't have any, Ms. Robertson. Motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no presentations this morning. We have no delegations, but we do have several reports this morning. And the first is a funding request from the Catnap Society. Over to you, Ms. Mercer. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to quickly pass it over to Ms. Slater to go through the points of this report.
Excellent. Welcome, Ms. Slater. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, Your Worship and Council. I'm here to introduce the funding request from the Catnap Society. And so the city has received another grant application from the Catnap Society in the amount of $36,000. As you will remember, in 2022, so last year, we did award the Catnap Society another grant for $15,000. In Nanaimo, the Catnap Society has taken on the responsibility for keeping the feral cat population under control. So the society has been operating for over 22 years and is run by approximately 90 volunteers who donate over 30,000 hours per year. The majority of the costs incurred by the Catnap Society are veterinary costs. So funds are needed to spay and neuter cats, which of course keeps the cat population under control. And funds are also used to treat cats with injuries, disease, and illness so that they can eventually be rescued and be adopted. So through discussions with the Catnap Society, in order for them to continue the level of operations that they're providing, $25,000 afterwards is the level of funding that they would need to request. And this is on an annual basis. So the request is $36,000 for 2024 and then $25,000 ongoing after that. And so the challenge with this, of course, is that similar to some of the other grant applications that we've seen during the year, once a request becomes more than annual and we're seeing it on an annual basis, it doesn't really meet the definition of an emergency anymore. So it's hard to come in with an application under the emergency category of the grant funding. And so in looking at this, I think it's probably time for us to look at whether or not Catnap warrants operating funding on an annual basis or not. So the overarching question is whether or not animal control services that the Catnap Society provides are considered an extension of the municipal animal control services that we provide. And if they are, then there's an argument to be made that a certain level of ongoing funding makes sense. And if they're not considered an extension of services, then council may determine that they don't want to provide funding. In 2020, an animal control service review was completed, and one of the recommendations from that report was to consider providing some level of financial assistance to support Catnap's activities. So the probably very best news that I have for you today is that no decision needs to be made today on this. This report is being brought forward so that Finance and Audit Committee and Council can have more time to contemplate this request before having to make a decision at a future financial planning meeting. And at this point, that's tentatively scheduled for December 1st.
Thank you very much, Ms. Slater. Any questions for Ms. Slater? Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Ms. Slater actually just answered my first question. I looked at the options suggested. So if we were to approve option one today, all we're doing is saying that we will consider this in our future budget deliberations, and we're not making a decision today about granting the funding.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Thorpe, yes, that's correct. The decision would be deferred to December 1st. There will be a decision point on a slide at the financial plan presentation that would contemplate the levels of funding requested.
Thank you. And I have a second question, if I may, Your Worship. I always get confused between the Catnap Society and the spay and neuter program, SNP program. And I thought one of those, it must be the SNP program, we had added as a budget point in a past year's decision. Am I correct? Do we give them regular funding?
So through the chair, previously we have had requests from the SPCA for the SNP program, which is the spay and neuter program run through the SPCA. Through discussions with CatNap, what I'm gathering is that they're doing a lot more of the spay and neuter program through CatNap. We haven't seen any requests come from the SPCA in a number of years, but we don't provide them with operating funding. They've also been coming forward regularly through the other grants program.
Okay, well, that answers my question, and I thought for some reason that we had approved regular funding to them, but I'm obviously mistaken, not for the first time. I was interested in Mr. Nielsen's comments in the report, and I would be prepared to support option 1 after other discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perino, please.
Thank
Sorry, just hang on.
Sorry, it didn't want to turn on there. Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, just a question. How many animal support groups do we fund? Do we support?
Through the chair, in terms of animal control or nonprofit societies that we fund, currently I don't know of any. We don't normally provide operating funding to any non-for-profit societies. It would have to be considered an extension of municipal services.
Okay. However, we do give in grants to other animal support groups. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
The
correct.
only other group that I know of is SPCA.
That's it, eh? Okay. Okay. Because there are other animal support groups out there. I think. I'm not sure.
Oh, through the chair, I'm sorry. I haven't been approached by any other groups. I am sure there must be some that exist.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Certainly, if someone wants to move the motion, I'd be happy to speak to it.
So moved.
Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Manley. Discussion, Councillor Perino, do you want to say anything further?
No, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe? What I was going to say is simply this. We aren't being asked to make a decision this morning, but I must say I'm leaning heavily in favor of this generally. This is an entirely volunteer organization. Nobody's getting paid to do any of this. It's rendering a valuable service to the community. I think we've all read the articles about the destruction of our bird life in every community across North America as a result of feral cats and unsupervised cats. So it just strikes me that this is a very small amount of money potentially for a very good service. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. If this program didn't exist, would this just be left to animal control, and would they be doing this kind of program, or would they just be euthanizing animals?
Oh, through the chair to you. Yes, if CatNap Society wasn't around to provide the services that they provide, then it definitely could create additional workload for animal control. And at that point, depending on what level of service that we wanted to provide, it could potentially cost money that way.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm in support as well. Thank you.
If there are no further speakers, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the BC Hydro Sustainable Communities Fund Mobile Home Park Energy Conservation and Emissions Reduction Strategy. Mr. Holm, good morning. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and committee members. I'm going to turn this one over to Ting Pan, manager of the sustainability section, to introduce. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Worship and Council. So this report is proposing that we submit application to the BC Hydro Sustainable Communities Program in partnership with the Regional District of Nanaimo to develop a mobile home parks energy conservation and emission reduction strategy. So through our research, we found that mobile home parks face some unique challenges when it comes to reducing their energy use and emissions and switching fuels, but also recognizing that they're one of the most affordable housing types in our community. And we have 1652 1,652 mobile homes in about 20 mobile home parks in Nanaimo, and 10% of them are still on oil. A significant portion are still on natural gas, and there are also some electrical capacity issues at the park level. It is more complex than single-family homes conversion. So we are aware that BC Hydro is also focusing on this area and has done their own study. So this will be built on, the ongoing and recent study and efforts in trying to help mobile homeowners to also have the option, at least to transition to electric heat pumps. So the strategy is going to help identify those challenges and find cost-effective solutions that is appropriate for our region. So staff is proposing using $15,000 from the Climate Action Reserve Fund as the cash contribution towards the project. And the project will also include equal contribution from the RDN, and the total cost will be around $75,000. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm curious about how far the $75,000 would go. I'm seeing that, there's a need to change transformers to the electrical servicing of a mobile home park. So approximately, what would that cost, and what would it cost? So is this going to be doled out mainly for the whole park to change transformers out, or is it going to be to individual mobile homeowners, or a combination of both?
Through the chair, so the $75,000 project is only going to help us develop a strategy as opposed to actual money that the mobile home parks can use towards electrical upgrade, I think. The strategy's intent is really trying to figure out, of all the mobile home parks in the region, what are some of the common challenges and opportunities. We already know that mobile home parks, if they do energy conservation, it could potentially lower the cost of doing electrical upgrade. So we're trying to do some analysis with the actual mobile home parks to kind of, give different options so they can find the most cost-effective ways moving forward.
And does BC Hydro have any programs to assist mobile homes beyond this to help with those conversions?
Through the chair, so they did a study in 2021, so they recognize a lot of opportunities, and they have programs that could support the energy conservation side of activities, but we're curious to know if a lot of the mobile home owners actually are aware of them, so that's one thing that we want to uncover. And the other thing is that they're running some pilot right now, so they were quite keen to collaborate on that, and we're also curious to see, how they're going to address the capacity issues. So that's something that we want to explore through this project as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you. Just something that Councillor Manley had said about conversion, but this is not conversion. This is strictly strategy. This is just to take a look at the park, see what the strategy is, and attempt to make a plan to move forward. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. The strategy is just really more looking at, the challenges and opportunities and what are some potential solutions. It's not the actual conversion. Okay. We were talking about conversion more in the context of, hoping that we can set them up. Eventually they can, yes, convert from oil or, gas to electricity. They can have that option.
Okay. So you'll be working with the park owners, not the individual homeowners?
Through the chair, I think we will probably engage with both, but definitely the park operators, because they play a critical role in this.
Okay, thank you so much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just note that the RDN, as it states in our report, has already agreed to a matching amount to the city, which is encouraging. So if there's no further discussion, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Eastmere. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciate the presentation, you two. The next is the Online Accommodation Platform Funds. Mr. Holm, please.
Thank you, Chair. And this report, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Brinkman to present and take questions, but effectively reporting regarding our obligations to Destination BC to identify where the city intends to allocate online application platform funds that it receives, which are part of the municipal regional tax on short-term accommodations. And Ms. Brinkman will explain further. Thank you.
Ms. Brinkman, good morning. Thank you.
Good
Please.
morning. Excuse me. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Holmes. So this report is to outline a proposed allocation of the online accommodation platform revenue that the city has received to date and the OAP revenue that the city expects to receive in 2024. The city is required to report this to Destination BC by the end of this month. So since 2018, the city has been collecting, our OAP funds have been collected from short-term rental accommodations as a 3% tax, and this is part of the provincial MRDT program for all short-term rental accommodations. To date, the city has allocated OAP revenue to the rent bank program and rent supplement programs. And in the past 2 years, since the pandemic ended, the tourism is up and the city has received more OAP revenue. So we currently have $588,986 of unallocated OAP revenue. And based on the trends of 2023, it is expected the city could accumulate $350,000 of OAP revenue in 2024. However, the new provincial regulations for short-term rentals may reduce this amount, so that's to be determined. So in total, the report to Destination BC should outline how the city intends to spend $938,986 of OAP revenue. And so staff's recommendation is to use $438,986 towards acquiring land related to the city's partnership with BC Housing for supportive and affordable housing, and to utilize $200,000 to continue to support the rent bank and rent supplement programs in 2024, and to use $300,000 also related for infrastructure and land improvements, also related to the city's partnership with BC Housing for supportive and affordable housing. So these recommendations are consistent with city plan policy and actions in the integrated action plan, and also these recommendations are consistent with the provincial guidelines on how municipalities may use OAP funds. So those are my comments. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me, I can't quite remember, but would we be able to use any of these funds to help fund the warming centers?
Ms. Brinkman.
So through the chair, so on the first page of the staff report, there is the list of criteria, and it's from Destination BC. It's not an exhaustive list, and they themselves have acknowledged that. But what it does say is you can acquire, construct, maintain, or renovate housing or shelter. You can acquire, improve, or land intended to be used for housing or shelter. So those are the two categories that may apply to in response to that question.
Follow up, Your Worship?
Please.
Was there any consideration given towards the warming shelters? Because we know it's a desperately needed. We're not seeing funding coming from the province or the feds. So to me, I may like to see some of this money go towards that if we could find a second operator. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I must say, Councillor Armstrong, it's an interesting, how shall I say, approach, but my read of it is I think we'd be trying to stretch the guidelines beyond where they're supposed to go, but that's just my sense.
I think so. Shelter.
Anyone else? Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Through you, I do think that's a really interesting point that Councillor Armstrong raises, and I would be interested to see if we could get more clarification on whether a warming center counts as a shelter, because I think it may be a bit of a stretch, but we also do have local shelters that are struggling with renovation costs and things like that to be able to continue operating. And yeah, so whether that may be an option, but I really appreciate this report, and generally I think it looks like a good allocation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's funny because when I read this, it's obviously just me, but the way I see it, supporting housing, rental, and shelter programs. So I just assumed that as part of the shelter programs, that it would be the warming centers as well. And I guess that's not stipulated as a shelter program at all. Is that correct?
Through the chair, you're correct in that the guidelines aren't extremely clear, and
Yeah.
Destination BC acknowledges that when we have checked in with them from time to time on various options. So we could certainly verify.
Okay. Councillor Armstrong makes an excellent point, and I'd certainly be ready to move this, Your Worship, if you wish.
To move the recommendation.
Yes, please.
Seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Discussion? For what it's worth, I think it's unlikely to be able to stretch it to include a warming center because shelters imply overnight stays, basically. I think that's really the way that it would have to be interpreted. But you know, this is not going to hold anybody back from doing what we have to do at some point in the future. I must say, I think the recommendations of staff are sensible. You can't have affordable housing without land. The rent bank and rent supplement programs have saved a lot of people from slipping out of housing, however inadequate it might be, or adequate for that matter, from slipping onto the streets. And the infrastructure that we're required to provide, you know, in our work with BC Housing, I think is a good use of the funds. So thank you to staff for the recommendations. Councillor Manley or Councillor Perino?
No, you just didn't turn it off. Your Worship.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Hemmons, sorry.
Worship, I support staff recommendations on this, although I am very curious about the proposition of using it for shelter going forward, recognizing that the timeline is not, like, we can't really work with it if we're going to use it for shelter this year. Can I just have confirmation from staff, please, that we will investigate this for next year and get clarity in terms of what we can use this funding for next year?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, my button's not working.
Yep, sorry.
There we go.
You're on now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, the one thing I would say about this is that if we could have some flexibility in this. I think one of the most important things we can do is provide rent supplements to keep people in place, because we're just seeing more and more people that shouldn't be out on the streets. And so if we see there's a growing need from the organizations that allocate the rent supplements, I'd like to see some more funds go towards that, just because I think it's a really important aspect of how we deal with homelessness in the community, prevention.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm just looking at recommendation C, and I'm wondering if we could put in there, and I don't know if this is applicable or not, and warming shelters or overnight shelters, if applicable. And then that would allow us to use that if it was applicable. Then we wouldn't have to come back to it.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I think well, there's a number of things. I think we could certainly take it away and get you clarification. I would note that bullet point 4 says supporting shelter programs. So I think there's an opening there to fund shelter programs. If council wanted to, we would absolutely go away and get you that confirmation if that's what council wanted to proceed with. However, what I would say is my understanding is we actually need to allocate the amount in the program that we're putting towards that. What staff have done here today is brought you 3 recommendations of what I would say are commitments that council's already made, either through MOUs or other agreements. So if we don't fund it from the online platform, if we take money away from one of these 3 to fund shelter programs, then you're going to be requested to use more of your housing legacy reserve, for example. So this is, in our mind, focused on things that we've already committed to, but we're absolutely happy to explore other things if council desires.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. And on to the update of reserve policy. Ms. Mercer, the famous reserves, the money we have stored away that everyone wants to spend.
Thank you. So this is really an administrative report. So with the addition of the new Harewood Centennial Turf Field Reserve Fund, we needed to update the reserves policy. So what you'll see attached to this report is an updated policy that includes this new reserve.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Perino, the recommended motion. Any discussion? Not seeing.
Well,
Councillor Perino?
Your Worship, I just wanted to say, what we used to call this a housekeeping issue, right? It's just putting it, just phrasing it properly, so that's all. Thank you so much.
Nicely put. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no other business that I'm aware of. And we had no one in the audience today apart from staff, unless they've got questions. So the next appropriate motion would be for adjournment. Moved Councillor Manley, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.